Hey everyone, you're here with Mark Batwell on Perfect Gardens TV. So, like we promised about a month or so ago, we came on, introduced you to one of our growers, Chris. He's a veteran, served with our country. Once again, thank you so much, Chris, for your service. Very much appreciate that. If you haven't checked out our monthly membership, I highly recommend to do so. Just for $2.99, your questions get sent to the top for quick replies. I'm asking for a little more support to build up my war chest so that I can continue to keep giving you open and honest reviews, and we can further defend our right for free speech. Thank you so much, everyone. And I promised that we would follow up with some grow journals with this gentleman because we wanted to create a system that was as automated as possible, as efficient as possible. So, and Chris can go ahead and tell his story a little bit, just so it was as hands-off as possible in a sense. And he was able to make it happen without it being too intensive in his life. So let me go ahead and turn it over to Chris, and if you can just explain what's been happening and go from there.
So basically, I started to grow. I looked into, like, we did a bunch of research and everything. I looked into different technology type things based around it. So, like, I got the Inkbird humidity, I got the Inkbird heater, and then I paired that with I think it was ATC exhaust fan and a bunch of other things, just to make it to where my setup ran itself the whole time. All I had to do was add water and then watch them grow, and then do whatever I need to do after that. And I'd say it's worked pretty well. I think trying to get the Inkbird to kind of talk to the ATC, it's been a little bit of issue, but it's worked well. The ATC, I think it's a Cloudline 6 is what I have, has worked great. I haven't had any issues with any of it. Besides the two kind of being off in temperature wise, depending on how far they are from each other, everything seems to work well.
Just to help with the viewers, where did you get your seeds from?
Oh, I went through, I think it's Herbie seed this time.
Herbie seed. Okay, just because we have kind of noticed some, we don't know what the quality is going to be like, and I do want to take responsibility, but we have noticed that two of the genetics were supposed to be the same, and they look completely different, right?
Yeah, one of it could be a little bit of my fault, but they were at the exact same from starting from the seed to coming up, and one of them really stretched in the beginning as a seedling and fell over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it made a comeback, but it acted completely different. And looking at it now, it looks like a completely different plant.
The seedling falling over, I thought that was actually really interesting because we're actually seeing phosphorus and potassium excess, correct? That's what we kind of it settled into being.
Yeah, I think so.
We're using down to earth, going through, keeping it as simple as possible, and explain to the growers kind of like what happened and what's been going on through your grow, and how did we lead up into a potassium phosphorus excess possibly while using dry amendments, because I thought that was really interesting, and that's why I really wanted to share as well.
I mean, I don't know if I know everything behind it. I know what I did. I made a few mistakes along the way when I mixed my soil. I started with basically what the box recommended.
And you didn't make a mistake. We talked about everything. So I don't want to say we ever made a mistake. We tried different things to see what would happen.
Well, I jumped the gun is what it was. I didn't let the soil cook long enough. That was my mistake on that one. But for what we did talking about it is I put in basically the amendments, what was recommended, mixed it up, started. And I have to say from the very get-go, everything went really well, though. I put in 4 seeds, 3 of them sprouted. And what was funny is when I tried to pull apart the starter to see if the seed did anything, I couldn't find the seed. So I don't know what happened there. But I lost my train of thought. Where am I? So we mixed up the soil, started out, and everything was going great. The plants were taking off. Basically, all I was doing was watering. And then we started to see a little bit of what looked like a calcium or a magnesium deficiency. And I think we gave a little bit of languinite, and that seemed to go away. But then as it started to grow and go into flower, it looked like a deficiency in the beginning. Like we were seeing all the signs for a deficiency, but as they got larger, they started to develop what looked like excess, especially with the smaller leaves at the top and the difference. But between the two genetic plants, there was really no difference between the two. Besides, there was no difference in environment. It was completely the genetics of the plant. So I got one that has, huge flowers coming up in every direction. Then I got another one that's really short and squatty, and it's flowering, but it's not doing anywhere near as well as the other plant.
And that sour D is actually developing. It's going to be interesting how it finishes out, because it is It's developing similar to how sourdough develop. And I think the issue with most sourdough that people run into is not letting them go long enough. But these are autos. So we're going to see where this goes with that one. I would say that you definitely received a sourdough for that one that's growing. But once again, like we're all seeing the so where did the toxicity come into? Like what did we do after we added the langonite to now? Like did we add more langonite? Did
we actually did add linguinite another time, but the issue was probably me, because in the beginning when I was trying the new auto pot system, trying to make everything automated, and I made a mistake in the beginning when I put the air stones in. They're kind of sitting too high, so they're actually out of the water line because I didn't know where they fall. So it wasn't pushing enough water to the plants, and it probably went 4 days where they weren't getting enough water. Then I just basically nixed that whole system except for the air stones and went to watering myself. And when I started with the watering, I was putting water in and then I would get a little runoff and then I'd stop. Well, as they got bigger, I didn't think to adjust, and I was giving them water because I didn't really want a lot of runoff. And I think I started underwatering. So I would feed them when the deficiency came up. I'd feed them. I would like water them. But I think what was happening is they were drying back and not using up the nutrients. So when I went to the next feed, it basically was pushed them over the edge. I really don't know quite what I'm talking about because this is my first grow. But like we were seeing a deficiency in the beginning, and then that seemed to just slow down and pretty much stop. And then we started seeing an excess. And I really think that the drying back and everything just being held in the soil and then adding more on top of it basically pushed it to where it started going to excess.
And I completely agree with you on this because the langonite's water soluble. We also added in an additional liquid PK or something like that, correct?
So looking back at it, we actually did a tea around the week 4 for calcium, and I think that kind of helped with that issue. And then we started seeing the other deficiencies. So later that week, I want to say it was 5 days later, we did the languinite tea. And
was there any runoff on the langonite tea?
No, that's the thing is like by that time I was feeding it the water, and I was doing like a bamboo stick method. Like, have you ever heard of that before where you kind of like basically put a bamboo, it's a barbecue skewer, put it down, wait 15, 20 minutes, check it. And it seemed to look good, but I think it was just using it way faster than it was in the beginning. So I mean, that really.
You were also, sorry to interrupt you, just to confirm this, you were also not adding more water as your plants were growing, right? You're adding the same amount of water. Okay. And then, okay, so we're kind of now discussing this situation, and all I'm doing, you're actually doing a great job. Please don't ever say, I'm a first time grower. I'm not sure what I'm saying. You actually, you have no filter. It's like the most beautiful way to ever listen to something, because you're describing what you're seeing. It's as clear as day, right? So it doesn't get much better than this. And what I want to do is I want to listen to what you're saying, and then we're kind of just describing the story. So the langonite is water soluble. When you look at it, I think it's like 60% water soluble if I look at the box, right?
I have the I can look at it too, but I even bought the powdered version, so you don't even need to make it a tea. You can just basically stir it up.
It's already done.
Yeah, I think it is pretty much most of it's water soluble.
And then and it was very quick. It was only about a week. We caught it fairly quickly. But it was just a week where there was these frequent dryback periods happening. So we added more of a water soluble material in combination of the plant growing, taking up more water. And then in addition to that, more salts were being added into that growing media.
And so here's where
I find out more. Go ahead.
Where I made another mistake and actually wanted to bounce this off you to see if from what everything I've been reading is correct. So when you're reading NPK, it's based off teaspoon, that's parts per million if you add a teaspoon to a gallon. I think that's correct. And I've seen it in a few different places. But when you read for me, the problem was I assumed reading the box recommendations where it would always say 1 to 2 tablespoons or a tablespoon of this to a gallon, or their mix ratios. That's what I was adding. So I was suspecting that like a tablespoon to a gallon of water would give me this NPK rating. But what I wasn't understanding is they actually mean for every teaspoon, that's the parts per million you're getting for your gallon of water. So basically, when I was feeding them, I was also feeding them basically 3 times the amount I should have fed them. Does that make sense?
100%. Did you ever check your parts per million before feeding them the water itself or the
No,
EC of it?
I wasn't checking parts per million or anything like that in the beginning because my thought process going in was like everything would be and in the soil and I'd water it and we'd run it through. So I really didn't know what I didn't know at the time. And as I'm catching up with it, that's where I'm running into an issue is I didn't know where I was making mistakes, but as we've gone along and you would tell me something new, I'd basically put two and two together to be like, oh, this is where I made that mistake. But I actually wasn't checking parts per million because a lot of times I was seeing that soil people, one of the conference calls that we had was they were talking about how regular soil, you run water through it and you can get 3,000 out of it.
Yeah, it's and I don't ever check the EC too. I mean, this is such a rare occasion, rare occasion. That's why I wanted to document it, right? Because it was a combination of the plant growing, a dry back periods, and water solubility of that it could still lead to an excess, and I think personally, if we kept up with the watering and we did the tea, I don't think we would have ever started to see any issues personally, and then we would have never added the excess. Or you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So
that the dry back is what was causing the deficiencies, and then trying to treat the deficiency without giving it the proper amount of water basically ran into the excess. So you can see it clear on the plant where deficiencies were towards the bottom lower portion of the plant, and then at the very top you start seeing the excess.
And I remember you telling me, right? Like you nailed it on the dot when you sent me over, because I love how you process. You really do a methodical way of processing. You like to try to solve your problem. And then you saw the primary, and then you started to work through, and you're like, oh, I also see calcium deficiency. I see a magnesium deficiency. And you started to work through them. Tell me if I'm correct, right? And and we didn't use the Epsom salt, but at a small moment, you're thinking, maybe I should add some Epsom salt, right? And
I'm moments away. Like I bought it all. Especially like I know you say don't say you're a new grower, but when you start looking at it, you see these charts and they're like, you see this, you see that, it's got to be this. But it's like, well, wait a minute, I see two from this one from this one, and then one from over here. Which one is it? And it's like, oh, it's all three of those. But is it just one of them that's causing it? Is it just a little bit of everything? It gets tricky, but it takes a lot of thought process to look through, and especially Google's your friend on that one, because I've probably looked at a tree's worth of leaves at this point being like, oh, that's recognizable, and just basically processing and think. It's really difficult to kind of wrap your mind around that. I don't have a problem, I have 6 problems, but they're caused by this one. Exactly. And that takes a lot of research and like looking through. That's why it's great when I just send it to you and be like, am I right? Because like trying to figure that out sometimes is pretty difficult, especially when you get down into the macronutrients and stuff. Because if you start reading about those and you've gone that far, you're probably way into the weeds on some shit and messed it up. I'm sorry.
No, please continue. I was agreeing with you.
I did want to touch base with you on the go back to what you were talking about, the parts per million in soil and things like that. Mm-hmm. I finally started tracking the parts per million because it's so high at EC. It won't even track it on my truncheon. It maxes it out every time. So there was when I flushed it, remember the first flush, after running, I think 3 gallons through each one just to see where everything was at. I was still, I started at 6,000, over 6,000 parts per million. And then I flushed them, and then I ran out of like water I had prepared. So I ended up at, one of them was still at 35. No, by the end of that one ended up being 25. The other one was 35 and one was 4,000. But what doesn't make any sense to me, you think if you flushed it and you kept going, it gets lower. Well, the salts were still super high, so I flushed it again. And the one that was one of my lowest, I got it down to 25. So the one I got down to 35, when I flushed it again, it was back up at 41.
At 41.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's crazy about these numbers go everywhere, because I'm doing this by gallon, and then I'll check it again at the end to see what came out, what's still in, and want to be like, you're thinking, oh, I'm almost there. I'm at like 1,600. And then you run the gallon through and it's like, oh, 2,700.
Complete sense though. But if you think about it, it makes 2 cents for 2 reasons, right? From the day before, the water dried back, right? So it increased the concentration. And then there's a very good possibility that when salts dry up, it creates dry pockets of salts, right? So when you flush it, you might be dissolving. You might not even dissolve some of these pockets because of the surface tension around the salts. And then as the water penetrates it and soaks deeper in, the salts will begin to slowly dissolve, so that surface tension isn't there the second day. And so when then you flush it, or the third day and you flush it, those salts will get dissolved. And so now it's increasing again. And so those two factors I've thought about. I don't know if I'm not a scientist, but over the years I'm like, okay, these are the two things I think they are.
But that brings me out to one of the things I wanted to pick your brain about is, so the last flush, the one that was doing the best is now back up to 41, and this has been nothing but water. I haven't given them anything, and I'm flushing gallons through it, and it's back up to 41. So I got thinking, am I flushing wrong? So that's another question, because I started doing research on that, seeing how many gallons you're supposed to put through. Some people say you just keep flushing until you get what you want. And then other people was like, you do a gallon per gallon of soil.
Mike, what do you think? If you ever flush, I know you grow the trees out there, but if you were going to flush, what are you looking for? Amount of water, just a certain amount of ratio to soil, or are you looking for a specific parts per million?
Well, when I like to flush, I like to get my soil nice and moist, okay, and just to the point where it's going to overflow. And then I will give it a good shot of water to get an even runoff and to wash out some of the salts. But you know me, Mark, I'm growing organic, so I don't really have to deal with all these problems. But that's how I would take care of it. That's how I would do it.
Well, okay, so catching up a little bit, Mike. So Chris is all down to earth, right? And he just through the process, there was a dry back period. He got into using the langanite, and the langanite's water soluble, and then there was also an additional little bit more water soluble langanite that was purchased versus the granular material. And through the dry back periods, the plant really growing. I mean, during that time period, those plants really started to grow fairly quickly too, right?
Yeah,
so, and I would say between all those periods that you created a period of chaos, basically, where the parts per million in the pots actually rose to above 6,000 parts per million. And so he's been having to flush back out.
Because he's concentrating his nutrients because of the drying out. So maybe it wouldn't be such a big thing not to flush severely, do a quick one, but then just keep your humidity up so it'll naturally absorb all the nutrients in the soil, the plant, and the plant will clean itself out instead of like trying to wash out all the roots. And because you're destroying all that good work that you put in when you're flushing, right? When you're growing up. So you don't want to be doing that.
And that is a good point. There is this balance between flushing, but right now it's like quickly fix it. But if like exactly what Mike says, if we flush and then flush again and then flush again, the plants end up not really taking up any micronutrients. And so there is this just kind of making sure you're watering enough as we go forward.
Not to throw more on. So since I started flushing, I'm starting. Actually, did 3 photos of my lower leaves, middle, and top leaves, and I'm seeing this across the whole plant. I'm getting these little, like, some are yellow and some are red circles. I don't think it's a fungus. I done a bunch of research and typed that in basically on fungus all the time, or some kind of disease, and I don't think it's that. But I'm also having
sounds like manganese.
I was looking at manganese, but then I was looking at also they were saying it kind of looks like phosphorus, maybe potassium a little bit also, but because there's kind of that beginning stage we had when we started giving it a treatment, which I'm terrified to do. There's those new dots. The dots are through the whole plant.
Send me some pictures, and we'll work through this one, because this is a new one. As of right now, I think we kind of covered everything I wanted to document. Is just because, why is it important to document? It was because I'm a big proponent of this recipe, right? And I push it all the way through, encourage them. And if we're running into an excess with the dry amendments, we needed to just discuss how we got there so that other people avoid it, so that they don't think like, oh man, I'm running into the same issues I run into with the bottled nutrients. No, you're not running into the same issue. It was just a technical issue. And I guess there's a technical issue on the bottle, but still just working through it creates a better product, and educating people how to do that, to work through the problems.
Well, like you were saying in this too, it's if I'd have done the right thing, there wouldn't have been issues. The thing is, I took an issue and then I made it worse by not doing the right thing in the get-go with the water and then adding more nutrients on top of it. Where something as simple as adding more water until I got a little bit off would have fixed this problem.
It was kind of funny too. Remember when you sent a picture and I was like, the plants are drooping. Let's and then you're like, no, it's normal. It's normal. They do that every night. I'm like,
Going to sleep.
yeah.
That worried the hell out of me. So I did research on the exact strain of Gorilla Glue, and from the site that I got it from, and there's other people being like, oh yeah, they droop every night because like sometimes these auto flowers with the genetics of them cause them to do that. And it's like, you can't trust everything you read sometimes. Like,
Did the drooping change? Is this still drooping, or is it drooping a little bit? Not drooping at all anymore.
It's not really drooping at all. It's not like what it was.
And the drooping even didn't look like regular lack of water drooping. It actually genuinely looked like a genetics that do droop, because some genetics do droop. That is true, but I don't know. And I'm glad we felt it out and we ran with it, and we ended up being able to get to this point.
What was funny is it would happen at the same time almost every day. It would start about 2 hours before lights out. And then as soon as the lights came back on in the morning, it would kind of perk back up over the next 30 minutes. Then it would just do it all over again. Looking back at it now.
That's really interesting. Mike, I'd love to get your viewpoint real quick, just to describe what he just said right there, just in case you might have missed that, is that we saw this cycle in these plants, and they were drooping, and they would start drooping 2 hours before the lights turned off, right? And then as the lights turned back on, they would pick back up. But then as we increase the watering, the drooping has completely stopped. So it's really interesting to kind of think, do the plants at some level know like when they're going to be shutting down a couple hours before they shut down? And I don't know, but he saw the cycle that was over a course of about a week, right?
It's probably
longer than that.
Yeah, which means I probably were underwatering for a while.
So
that goes to show me that you're doing a good job, because your plants are so in tune to yourself that they know that they're going into sleep and they're releasing the water back into the stem. So they're going to start drooping. And as soon as they hear you moving around and they'll come, they feel the vibrations now. They come back alive when the lights come back on and they start drinking again. So it just goes to show me that you're very regular in your growing habits.
That makes sense. That makes sense, Mike. Actually, because where would that excess water be coming from, right? Except within the plant, and it'd be recycling itself to find balance. That's very interesting. I love that thought. That's why I love Mike. So Mike's one of the other content creators for Perfect Gardens. We'll be seeing Mike a lot more often, releasing some content specifically focusing on the Canadian market and other markets, testing equipment, testing other stuff, and just sharing his overall experience. So Mike, I appreciate you, brother.
You're welcome, and I'm glad to be here. So I'm not as technical, I'm a real hands-on farmer. You have to remember, from my background, all you needed to grow was a shovel and some seeds. And I've started going back with it because I see a lot of guys coming into a lot of problems with all these products and these distractions. So as you look at what I'm doing and what I want to do, I try to keep it simple. That's why I'm a big fan of organic. And usually when you're doing organics, it's pretty easy to fix a problem if you do come into one. Cheers to that. I'm glad you're doing the same way as me.
Chris, appreciate you, brother. And until the next time. Oh, wait, real quick, Chris, you're part of the, well, you're one of the, I know you're a VIP member, but you're also with the membership. I know, what do you think about that overall? Is it helpful? Whenever you want to go in there, is it interesting?
I like it. It's still like, I'm weird tech savvy in certain parts, but like social media and things like that kind of take me a minute to catch on. I like it though. It seems to, especially the Telegraph, I think is a great idea. You got, basically I'd posted pictures and I couldn't even figure out how to add a comment with the photos, and I was starting to get people recommending things and what they thought, and I was able to bounce the idea off a couple other people just to see like what they were thinking also, because I didn't know where to take it. But I like it. I think everything has worked out pretty well. And I know the VIP member has been great for me apparently, and then the group of being able to access all the additional videos and everything has been awesome.
Cool, brother. Appreciate you so much. Mike, you got any closing words?
Well, I gotta agree with Chris. The telemark is because you become a family of growers, and if anybody has a problem, everybody's really interested because nobody wants to see anybody fail. So you get a lot of immediate support right away, and there's no hate on that channel, on that page whatsoever. And nobody, even if you show up and you made a mistake and you burnt your plants, nobody's going to dump on you. Look, we'll try and find a solution to help you out. So that's the coolest part about that page.
Yeah, no one's kicked me out of the group, and I think the world's flat.
So that goes to show you. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, guys, have a great day. I'll talk to you later. Bye, brothers. The tiny amounts used in pesticide products are not expected to substantially increase the amount of these esters in the environment. So what they're saying here specifically is what the amount of esters that they use in these pesticides are not going to throw everything out of balance when you use it on a commercial level.